In Badger's Drift, brutal murders seem connected to a land development deal. If Barnaby doesn't solve this case in time, he's going to be forced to renew his wedding vows. We're talking a lot of symbolism.
The history of revenge theater.
And one of the best Midsomer villains ever in this episode of
Welcome to Midsomer.
Hello, and welcome to Midsomer, the podcast where we dissect all the mysteries, the murders, and the many weird things about the long-running hit TV show Midsomer Murders. I'm your host, Eric Buscher, and with me as always is my co-host, Eileen Becker. Hey, Eileen.
Hey, Eric. Today we are talking about Death's Shadow, the first episode of the second series. It originally aired January 20th, 1999. It was directed by Jeremy Silverstone and written by Anthony Horowitz. A-plus team. Let's head down to the fete.
Spoiler warning, we will be discussing the events of this episode, including the identity of the murderer. So if you haven't watched it yet and don't want to know who done it, pause this and go watch it. We will still be here when you get back.
He's giving Thai House to Ericsson's.
What, does it matter very much?
The biggest development this village has seen in 20 years. I can't say I'm over the moon about losing it.
Oh, Ian, I'm sorry. You know he's not well.
What?
Because I heard it from Caroline at school. She got it from Mrs. Bundy, who cleans for Dr. Henson. It's something in his head, a tumour or something.
A tumour?
Well, that's what she said.
Good.
At Badger's Drift Primary School, the ringing school bell signals it's the end of the school day and children come streaming out. Simon Fletcher drives up and watches a group of boys as they go off to throw rocks at an old greenhouse. Fletcher becomes distraught as they blindfold one of the boys and play, I guess, blind man's bluff.
Yep, blind man's bluff.
He gets out of the car, causing all the boys but the blindfolded one to run off. Fletcher walks up to him and begins to strangle him before he wakes up with a start. It was just a dream. Cue those title cards. At the Barnaby homestead, Tom and Joyce are trying to figure out how to celebrate their 25th wedding anniversary. Tom suggests a cruise. Cully suggests a ride to Venice on the Orient Express, but Joyce really wants to redo their wedding vows. Apparently the first time they got married, it was in a municipal office and was interrupted by Tom having to solve the case of the Pimlico poisoner, setting a precedent for their married life. So she wants a reset for the next 25, a big ceremony with all their friends at a church. So they visit St. Michael's Church in Badger's Drift. The 12th century church is covered in scaffolding, dealing with dry rot. Pastor Stephen Wentworth lives there with his wife Angela, who is very bitter and constantly belittling him. Pay attention, Joyce. Meanwhile, Dr. Barbara Henson is giving property developer Richard Bailey some bad news. He has an aggressive and malignant brain tumor that will require a risky surgery he might not survive. As he leaves the offices, he runs into real estate agent Ian Eastman. Eastman asks him about Bailey's upcoming plans to turn the Thai House property into a development, and isn't thrilled to learn that he's not getting the contract. Ian goes home to complain to his wife Brenda, who informs him about Richard's tumor because nothing is private. A spiteful Ian replies, "Good." Agnes Sampson is also not a fan of the development because it will displace 3 old trees. She tells her sister Claire that she thinks Richard's a hypocrite and seems quite happy with news of his tumor. That evening, it's the church committee meeting where they discuss the upcoming village fete. Attendees are the Wentworths, the Eastmans, Richard, Claire and her husband Reginald, and teen Charles Jennings. Richard very morbidly says he won't make the fete, and Angela seems bored with all of it, storming out of the meeting. Afterwards, Richard asks to meet with Stephen privately. That night, Ian goes for a walk, and Claire finds Agnes missing. The doctor gets a call and then drives to Richard's place, where he is sitting in the dark, lost in thought. Stephen wakes up hearing a noise in the house, but finds nothing really amiss, although he doesn't notice a sword missing from the wall. The next day, local Badger's Drift cleaning lady Mrs. Bundy discovers her second or third body. This time, it's Richard. Barnaby and Troy are called to a scene so gruesome it makes Coroner George Bullard appalled. Richard has been dismembered with his head chopped clean off. They discover the sword, covered in blood, as well as a bloodless axe in the yard. People in town have different reactions. The doc is relieved to learn that it's murder, not suicide. Stephen seems shocked and says that Richard told him he was planning to change his will to ensure the church gets a chunk of his money. He also tells them about finding the sword missing that morning. Claire also seems shocked by the murder. She tells him that some people are against the Tie House project, including Agnes, who doesn't seem unhappy at Bailey's death at all. Ian also doesn't seem so distraught when they meet with him. Ian says he wasn't worried about losing the project, but his wife discovers that they are nearly broke from a lot of mysterious expenditures. Ian also informs him that former Tie House caretaker David Whiteley owned some land that was blocking access to the development and was asking for a huge amount that Richard refused to pay. Whiteley remembers the detectives when they interview him and informs them straight up he didn't kill Richard, even though he hated him. He also says he saw Simon Fletcher drive through Badger's Drift the night of the murder. Fletcher is a famous theater director who's in the area for a summer workshop on The Duchess of Malfi that, hey, surprise, surprise, Cully just happens to be attending. Cully and Fletcher grab a drink after the workshop, and he says he's actually from the Drift, but left when he was 16. He and Richard were good friends, and he's the reason Simon has returned. When he learns about Richard's death, he suddenly leaves. Listeners, before we jump into the tourist info, if you hear some noise in the background, that is because someone has decided to do some pressure washing and nearby, and it's, this is the problem with home recording.
Yeah, there's also the occasional cat.
Yeah. Tourist info, though. Hey, we are in Badger's Drift, which has appeared in 6 episodes of Midsomer Murders. It's the home to a cookie factory, a rock festival, an annual fete, and multiple murders. But then, what can you expect from a village that allows archery in the middle of a crowded public square? Seriously, how many people do you think get shot with arrows every fete?
I've been to Renfest where they have, and these archery things are way off in the distance, off to the side.
Not at Badger's Drift.
Well, standing in for Badger's Drift once again is the Lee and Hyde Heath in Buckinghamshire. The primary school is in Peppard, Oxfordshire, while St. Michael's Church is played by the church at Bledlow, also in Buckinghamshire. The Corsten scenes were shot in the town of Wallingford in Oxfordshire. And Agatha Christie lived nearby with her second husband, so there's a very Agatha Christie-esque feel to this episode.
Oh, yeah. So this episode is the first episode in the second series of Midsomer Murders. It is the first episode that actually is original. It is not based off any of the novels by Carolyn Graham. And I think we can all see how they were trying, at least in this series, to establish Badger's Drift like a Cabot Cove, the town from Murder, She Wrote, that Jessica Fletcher lives in and half the episodes we're dealing with. And there's also, we see a lot of callbacks to both killings of Badger's Drift as well as certain other episodes that happen to have taken place in that area. So we had the return of characters David Whiteley, who is a suspect in Killings of Badger's Drift, Olive, the real estate agent who appeared in several episodes, Mrs. Bundy, who I believe definitely found the body in Written in Blood, and I kind of feel like may have found a body in Killings of Badger's Drift.
That poor woman needed some serious therapy after all of this.
I mean, this time she finds the body and then gets covered in blood. I really hope she quits cleaning houses at that point.
Yeah.
So we also had the return of the vampire lawyer from Written in Blood, James Jocelyn, who comments that his clients keep getting murdered. Yeah, that's a problem.
Yeah. And that should have made him a suspect.
Well, one has to feel that in Badger's Drift, a lot of people's clients are getting murdered for various reasons. I've hair salons closing because so many little old ladies just end up dying.
Yeah, the only ones staying in business are the undertakers and the florists.
We also even got a mention of our beloved Rainbirds, as Pastor Stephen mentions how much he really liked Dennis, which should have been a hint right there. I also kind of liked that they just drove past Tie House at first, right?
Mm-hmm.
And if you didn't really know what it was, they linger on it.
Yeah.
And if you remember Badger's Drift, you knew what that was. But if you didn't, it just was it was kind of an Easter egg.
Yeah. Yeah.
And we also find out what happened to poor Henry Trace, the man who married a young lady who was sleeping with her own brother.
I do love that they did take an effort to really make sure that they were calling back to the original Badger Killings of Badger's Drift episode with all the filming in this one.
Yeah. Why do you think they abandoned this idea?
I don't know, because it does work in other mystery series. There were a few people in Cabot Cove that cropped up on a regular basis. Like the mayor was very consistent.
The mayor, the sheriff.
Yeah. A few of the old ladies and stuff. It works in like Broken One mysteries, where they seem to have a little group of people that kind of are the town that, are periphery to it, the investigation at times, but they're like going to a bar with them and stuff like that.
I honestly, I feel like they kind of looked at it as, at some point, because Midsomer is always multiple murders. It is at least, for the most part, it is 2 to 3 murders.
Yeah. Sometimes more.
Sometimes more. I think at some point you have to look at that in this town and going, that is a lot of people dying in one small sleepy, like, you can't say it's a sleepy village if every week 3 more people are brutally murdered.
Yeah.
And like, that was the difference between Cabot Cove, because Cabot Cove still has like an incredibly ridiculous murder rate.
Yeah.
For a town, like when you see the sign for Cabot Cove, the population is usually 2 to 3,000. But with Jessica Fletcher around, there's at least 13 murders a year. That's a really high murder rate.
That is a very high murder rate. One thing that they both do is they have actors repeat roles on occasion, but they also come back as different characters. So, yes. Yeah. So you do see that is a similarity between the two of them.
Right. We also got to meet Charles Jennings. We see him again in Dead Man's 11, which we've discussed, where he is murdered and is also the victim of Troy's homophobia.
Yeah, very much so.
Yeah. And I thought this was interesting, that there was some weird, I don't think it was intentional, but there was some foreshadowing in this episode. We see on the point, like at one point, Agnes has liberated the plans to Tie House, and you see that they're going to build a retirement home on there, which links, I feel, as like a kind of a weird foreshadowing to Blue Herrings.
Yeah.
And then we also have there's a few close-ups of church bells ringing, which reminds me of Ring Out Your Dead.
Yeah. I have noticed that when I'm kind of doing some research on some of these places that they film at and other areas, when I'm looking at things, that apparently retirement homes or repurposing old manor houses is a popular thing to do. So
yeah. So
that is not unusual, but it does kind of foreshadow what happens in that a bit. But yeah, the bells are always always remind me of Ring Out Your Dead, one of our favorite episodes.
Yep. And then we also, at the beginning of this episode, they had the title cards, as opposed to just putting the credits over some activity on screen, which also was a first and second season thing that gets dropped.
Yeah, they do it up for the first episodes of those 2 seasons. And I just looked at the filming, and they filmed the second season very quickly after they filmed the first season. Yeah. So it looks like that had been an intentional thing. Maybe they had everything kind of mapped out for the first 2 seasons after the pilot came, and then they had said, oh, we will bring these people back for the second season first episode, and had the title cards already done, and then dropped them when they realized that
they didn't need
it. It made it a little too cozy, and it's not really a cozy.
It's very quaint.
Yeah.
It's very quaint, and the show was pretty dark.
Yeah.
They also had another thing they had in this episode that they dropped relatively quickly after the first couple seasons: dream sequence, which was something very prominent in Killings of Badger's Drift.
Yeah,
and I think in a couple other episodes, and then it just disappeared because it just does not feel tonally appropriate to this show.
Yeah, I agree. Yeah, as Nettle says, it's not quite a police procedural, and it's not quite a cozy. It's somewhere in between those two.
Yeah, and it's like, but the dream sequence is always a very arty thing.
Yeah.
And I would never, like, for example, in this, Simon's dream sequence is basically him just remembering things from the past, and then he murders a child.
Yeah.
Which didn't happen.
Yeah. And they have replaced that with basically showing past events.
Yeah, flashbacks.
Yeah.
Which I think is more tonally appropriate.
Yeah.
So the inciting incident of this episode would be Richard Bailey and his diagnosis of a malignant tumor.
Mm-hmm.
What did you think of his response when he finds out?
I don't know if I would have had that kind of sang-froid if I'd heard that, I have a very, very malignant. I mean, obviously he knew that something was wrong, because, you don't go to the doctor to check on, malignant brain tumors if you aren't experiencing some symptoms. But, yeah, he seemed very resigned very quickly.
It was the most British way to take that diagnosis.
Yeah.
He might as well have said, "Oh, well."
Yeah.
I also thought it was funny that everybody knew the diagnosis in 5 minutes.
I think, his cleaning lady Mrs. Bundy had been gossiping around that he'd been going to the doctor, and she probably snooped in on some of his records, medical records that he had lying around, and saw that he was getting checked for a brain tumor. So,
well, everyone seemed to know that it was like this was incredibly serious, deadly brain tumor, which is what he had just discovered. And I was like, the only two people that could have done that, told everyone, was Richard or the doctor.
Mm-hmm.
I was like, that doctor is a gossip.
Yeah. And I was rather amazed that the medical lab would call the doctor so late at night that she would go immediately to his house, and it was almost midnight. It's like, what lab is open that late?
Yeah. I also like that everybody knows about the tumor within 5 minutes. However, the word of the murder is just like, people are like, they're like, didn't you know he was murdered 7 hours ago? I'd not heard this yet.
Yeah. Well, there wasn't Dennis Rainbird to be there right away.
Come on. More people are going to know about the murder than the tumor.
Yeah.
Hey, did you hear about the murder of this guy you may not know versus, hey, did you hear about this guy with the tumor that you don't care about at all?
Yeah. Yeah.
Richard and his pears.
Yeah.
His beloved pear tree.
Yeah. I will say, I do love a good pear.
Yeah, well, you can love a pear. I think Richard may have loved a pear. Like the way he's sniffing it. Doesn't he rub it on his face at one point?
Well, he had just learned he was going to die. I mean, it is one of life's joys. I will say, last year when I went to the Pacific Northwest and we were in Oregon, and we stopped at this farm that was selling fruit, and it's like, well, all I really want is one perfect pear, and I got one perfect pear, and it was the most extraordinary pear I've ever had. It was wonderful.
Yeah, but apparently if you just hung out at the Harvest Festival, you might have been able to get just a single pear, the way that apparently Richard gives Stephen, as Stephen calls out in his eulogy, a single pear. And I'm like, it's a whole tree, and he gives you one pear? What a jerk. I was curious, so I looked it up because they were showing the pear so much. Mm-hmm. So a pear can obviously symbolize many things, but one of the things the pear can symbolize is the Virgin Mary and the child, which I think that pear goes to symbolize the characters of Felix and Jennifer, the single mother and son who both are dead. We discover that they're an important part of this episode in the second half. We don't know who the father is. I feel like the pear is maybe symbolic of them.
Yeah, I think it's part of the religious symbolism that is a thread through this whole thing.
Yeah.
And that Barnaby points out the killings are very kind of godlike retribution.
There's a lot of symbolism in this episode.
Oh yeah.
A lot. Heavier than in most Midsommers.
Yeah.
I thought it was interesting that in this case we do see the murder, but we see it halfway through the episode in a flashback. And then we see it again once the killer is revealed. We see it again in a flashback. But I think it's interesting is that the first flashback, if you think about it, it is from the killer's memory.
Yeah.
Because at that moment, the killer is remembering the murder in contrast to Stephen's eulogy.
Yeah. And again, it's a reminder to never open the door late at night and say, oh, it's you.
Just don't open the door.
Yeah. This is why we have front door cameras, people.
Agnes is an interesting character, but she's really not so essential to everything.
Mm-hmm.
So let's just talk about her here. She seemed a bit high strung.
A little bit. Anybody who cheats at jigsaw puzzles is high strung.
Why?
I
Why would she
know.
cheat at a jigsaw puzzle?
You're gonna have pieces left over, Agnes. You know this.
The pieces left over. There's going to be chunks that just can't. Like she just gonna like cram them in, and it's like this weird, obnoxious looking puzzle. Like her borders must be insane. Like talk about modernist jigsaw look puzzle.
Yeah. Yeah.
I thought it was interesting is that when we see the school flashback and in the dream sequence, right? She is
Mm-hmm.
the teacher at the primary school. When she rang the bell to signal that school was over with, she went outside and rang the bell, even though she had just been inside with all the kids.
Yeah. Yeah, I've always wondered about that because you do see that, and I'm wondering if it's to alert like parents, especially mothers, who are always
Run for it! The kids are free!
yeah, to alert them. Hey, your kids are on their way home. Stop drinking.
But it's not that big a bell.
Well, these are small towns.
Yeah, but look, you saw where that school was located. There was no real houses nearby. It's like that. It just was weird that they go outside to ring the bell when the kids are all inside and they're like, we know.
Yeah.
You went outside, we know.
Yeah.
She also had the great line about, how about putting the boot on the other foot? Which doesn't really mean anything.
No.
A large part of this episode deals with revenge theater and the symbolism of the play The Duchess of Malfi. So, Eileen, why don't you take us to the history of revenge plays?
Sure. Revenge has long been a theme in literature, dating back to the ancient texts. Think Achilles exacting revenge on the dead body of Hector after Hector had killed Achilles' bosom buddy Patroclus. So when the Greeks invented drama, it's no surprise that revenge was a popular theme in tragedies such as Agamemnon and the Libation Bearers in Aeschylus's Orestia trilogy. The latter story of revenge was also covered by both Sophocles and Euripides in their respective Electra plays. It reached its bloody zenith with Euripides' Medea, in which the title character gets revenge on her faithless husband, Jason, by killing her children with him. Seneca the Younger took up the mantle of the revenge drama in first century Rome, with his plays that often recounted the famous stories of Greek and Roman myth, including versions of Medea and Agamemnon, as well as Thyestes, in which the title character's sons are fed to him at a feast by his vengeful brother. While most plays have been lost to time, drama did continue over the following centuries, especially with the Renaissance rediscovery of the ancient Greek and Roman dramas, which were being translated into English at the time. In 1561, Thomas Norton and Thomas Sackville wrote The Tragedy of Gorboduc, and it was performed that January for Queen Elizabeth I. A sort of proto-King Lear, it dealt with the tricky topic of succession, with revenge leading to the deaths of most of the main characters and the country descending into civil war. I'm sure Bess loved that one. As English drama began to be more sophisticated during the Elizabethan era, Thomas Kidd wrote the Spanish play, in which revenge was even personified as a character. A hugely influential play, it even featured a play within a play to, as a later writer would say, catch the conscience of the king, that writer being, of course, William Shakespeare. Many of Shakespeare's tragedies feature revenge, with Titus Andronicus standing out as being particularly bloody. It has 14 killings, with 9 of them on stage, 6 severed body parts, a rape, a live burial, and cannibalism. The revenge play reached its literary apotheosis with Hamlet, in which a young Danish prince is urged by his father's ghost to avenge his death. It takes him 5 acts to do so, and by the end, everyone is dead except Horatio and the Norwegian prince Fortinbras. Other examples of the revenge drama can be found in Christopher Marlowe's The Jew of Malta, which was mentioned in this episode, Cyril Tourneur's The Atheist Tragedy, or The Honest Man's Revenge, The Revenger's Tragedy, currently attributed to Thomas Middleton, John Marston's Antonio's Revenge, and of course The Duchess of Malfi by John Webster. Loosely based on a true story, the play follows 2 brothers who exact revenge on their sister, the titular Duchess, for marrying beneath her station. This sets into motion more revenge, and once again, almost everyone is dead by the end. The Elizabethan and Jacobean revenge dramas set the template for revenge tragedies to come, including ghosts that cry out for vengeance, the play within a play, and Machiavellian villains that are often caught by their own traps. Revenge continues to be a popular theme for writers, moving from the stage into novels, movies, and television. The quintessential revenge novel is The Count of Monte Cristo by Alexandre Dumas. Published in 1844, it chronicles a wrongly imprisoned man's search for revenge and has been adapted into many versions for the stage and screen. In 1970, British playwright Christopher Bond debuted his play Sweeney Todd, based on a character from the Penny Dreadfuls, but giving him more psychological depth. American composer and lyricist Stephen Sondheim saw the play and was wowed by his fresh take on the revenge tragedy. He then worked with Hugh Wheeler to create his musical masterpiece, Sweeney Todd, the Demon Barber of Fleet Street. Wrongful conviction and rape lead to murder, betrayal, and cannibalism, as its lead character serves a dark and vengeful god. Of course, mysteries often involve revenge, and the ultimate revenge mystery is mentioned several times in this episode: the murder on the Orient Express.
Yeah, I mean, at the end, we will discover that this is all about a revenge. And I think that kind of plays into sort of the bloody nature, the bloody savagery that you see in these kind of murders.
Yeah.
You want to take us into cast highlights?
Sure. Nick Denning was Man with a Secret Ian Eastman. He's a celebrated theater actor who worked with the RSC, the Royal National Theatre, and the Royal Court Theatre. He's also won 2 Irish Times Theatre Awards. On screen, he appeared in The Tudors, The Iron Lady, Da Vinci's Demons, and Hatfields and McCoys. Vivian Pickles played lumberjack Agnes Sampson. She started out as a child star in a series of Saturday morning films in the 40s. As an adult, she had celebrated theater for performances in John Osborne's Plays for England and Bertolt Brecht's Ball. On screen, she starred in Ken Russell's movie Isadora, about the legendary dancer Isadora Duncan. She also appeared in Candle Shoe, Nicholas and Alexandra, Oh Lucky Man, and Harold and Maude. This episode is her last on-screen role. She retired in 1999. Anna Cropper was helpful sister Claire Williams. She's appeared in Cromwell, The Moonstone, Couples, Emmerdale Farm, The Jewel in the Crown, and Castles. This was her last on-screen appearance, and she passed away in 2007. Her son, Linus Roach, has kept it in the procedural family. He played the ADA who took over for Sam McCoy on a few seasons of Law and Order. Gordon Costello played Stitch Reginald Williams. He did a lot of work with the RSC and was best known for playing Bardolph in the Henriade plays on stage and screen. He also appeared in Nicholas and Alexandra, The Idol, Wuthering Heights, and How to Get Ahead in Advertising. He passed away in 2007. By the way, his wife was Vivian Pickles, who played his sister-in-law in this one. Nettles also liked that he wore that jaunty Robin Hood cap while he was doing the archery. Mossy Smith played bad Dr. Barbara Henson. Her first on-screen role was an episode of Scarecrow and Mrs. King, way back in 1985. She was in the first Prime Suspect, The Riff Raff Element, AbFab, and Their Finest. Nick Robinson couldn't stand still Felix Bryce. He started as a child actor in Goodnight Mr. Tom, Tom's Midnight Garden, and Harry and the Wrinkles. As an adult, he switched to being a theater producer.
We have a few return visitors this time, starting with Christopher Villiers, who, as we mentioned, was the angry David Whiteley in Killings of Badger's Drift. He also appeared in Bergerac, Doctor Who, on the Mummy on the Orient Express episode, so another Orient Express connection, the ABC Murders, and Mrs. Sidhu Investigates. He also played Nigel in the criminally underrated movie Top Secret, which was the follow-up to the movie Airplane by the writers and directors, and it bombed, but I think it was just ahead of its time. Marlene Sidaway was unluckiest cleaning lady in the world, Mrs. Bundy. Now, she played Bundy in The Killings at Badger's Drift and Written in Blood. She's also in Judgment Day as a completely different character who meets a very gruesome fate. She appeared in Coronation Street, Hunting Venus, All Creatures Great and Small, and most recently in the film Alleluia. Timothy Bateson was Afraid of Sunlight lawyer James Jocelyn, who we also have seen in Written in Blood and will see in Orcus Fatalis. Now, he appeared in Nicholas Nickleby, The Mouse That Roared, Ring-a-Ding Rhythm, The Italian Job, Grange Hill, Labyrinth, and as Creature the House Elf in Harry Potter and the Order of the Phoenix. He passed away in 2009. Judy Parfitt was the miserable Angela Wentworth. Now, she's also in Days of Misrule. Parfitt has been nominated twice for Supporting Actress BAFTAs. The first was for 1984's The Jewel of the Crown. The second was for 2003's The Girl with a Pearl Earring. She's also appeared in David Copperfield, Dolores Claiborne, Ever After, and Call the Midwife. She was married to Tony Steadman until he passed away in 2001, A lot of people might recognize him as Socrates or Socrates in Bill and Ted's Excellent Adventure. Julian Wadham played walking archery target Simon Fletcher. We see him again in The Creeper. He's been in the films Maurice, The Madness of King George, and The English Patient. He's also been in The Casual Vacancy and The Crown. Next up, he's going to be in the show Black Doves on Netflix with Keira Knightley and Sarah Lancashire. Dominic Jeffcott was Pain in the Head Richard Bailey. He's also in the episode Four Funerals and a Wedding. Now, he had an early film role in something called Inseminoid, which IMDb says is about a crew of interplanetary archaeologists is threatened when an alien creature impregnates one of their members, causing her to turn homicidal and murder them one by one. Adding that to my watch list. He's also in The Jewel of the Crown, like pretty much everyone else in this episode, The Beiderbecke Affair, The Beiderbecke Connection, and most recently, Our Girl. Jessica Turner was Suffering Brenda Eastman. We talked a little bit about her when we did A Sacred Trust. She's had roles in Prime Suspect, All or Nothing at All, Poltergeists, Father Brown, and Tess of the D'Urbervilles. Terrence Corrigan was Ian's special friend, Charles Jennings. We said goodbye to him when we talked about Dead Man's 11. Corrigan is an Irish actor, and this was his first on-screen role. Since then, he appeared in Hornblower, The Bill, and Silent Witness. Eileen Davies played Judgy Olive Beauvaisin. That's how they said it, right?
Yep.
Close enough. We talked about her in Dead Man's 11 and Hidden Depths. This is her third and final visit as Olive, although we will hear about her again. You'll see when that comes. Career highlights include her role in Sightseers, which earned her a nomination at the British Independent Film Awards, and she played 3 different characters on Coronation Street. And then also, we had Neil Conrich, who played Police Constable Angel. Now, he was this character, Angel, in 6 other Midsomer episodes. He's also, outside of Midsomer, he's appeared in The Brief, Bad Girls, Wallander, and Reuniting the Rubens. And currently, he is a managing director at a voiceover agency.
Our village star this time is Richard Briers, who is seemingly nice Pastor Stephen Wentworth. He's a celebrated actor known for leading roles in The Good Life, Monarch of the Glen, and Ever-Decreasing Circles. While his first rise to fame was in TV sitcoms, he became friends with Sir Kenneth Branagh in the 80s, who began casting him in his Shakespeare productions on both stage and screen. He was in Hamlet and Henry V, as well as several of Branagh's other films like Peter's Friends. His final film was 2012's Cockneys vs. Zombies, which Eric may have seen a large chunk of.
I have. It's hysterical.
Briers passed away in 2013, and Branagh called him a national treasure, a great actor, and a wonderful man. He was greatly loved, and he is deeply missed. We will go deep into his performance after the break.
Yeah, he credits Branagh as reviving his career, getting him out of the sitcom comic actor and more into dramatic acting, or being thought of for dramatic roles. So, and I think he does a fantastic job, and we are going to discuss more of that when we come back in just a bit.
It's good to see such a large turnout to commemorate the life of Richard Bailey. He was taken from us in a way that passes all understanding. But I know and believe that his killer will be brought to justice.
And we're back. Let's talk about the second half of Death's Shadow.
Sir, don't do it!
Of course I'm going to do it. I should have done it years ago.
So Joyce is a little annoyed with Tom because she's worried the murder might cancel the anniversary plans. But Tom says that Stephen isn't a suspect, so it's going to be fine. Barnaby and Troy attend Richard's memorial service where Whiteley loudly says in front of everyone that he finally got the cash that he wanted for his property. Dr. Henson tells them that she had gone to see Richard that night because she discovered the test results were incorrect, and Richard's tumor wasn't malignant after all. But she chose not to disturb him since it was almost midnight. I mean, who would really want to hear, who would really want to know that you're gonna live?
Yeah, just before going to bed.
Yeah. She also saw Ian walking around, but Ian denies he was out at all. Barnaby is a little stumped at this point because he thinks the motive was the tie house development. But why murder someone who everyone thought was dying? They go and visit his solicitor, who tells him that Richard had only left the church £500 and had not been told he was changing the will. So why did Stephen say he was doing that? Confusing the matters even more, Whiteley is burnt alive inside his camper by a shadowy figure. Hey, the next day it's the village fete, and Steven needs a celebrity to open it, so he invites Simon to come and open the fete. Cully tells him she will be there with her dad, and Simon says he will talk to him about Badger's Drift primary at the fete. Meanwhile, our detectives go to the Whiteley crime scene where Bullard politely asks, "What the hell is going on?" Tom finds a singed photo of Whiteley's class at the primary school and recognizes a few faces in it. They go to Agnes's, who admits she was at Richard's the night of his murder, but only to chop down his beloved pear tree. She tried to use Richard's axe, but heard someone arrive at midnight who Richard recognized, and she ran away. Troy and Barnaby go to the fete for a little R&R, but that's cut short when the killer kills Simon with an arrow in the middle of everyone. Even in shock, Cully still manages to mention an important plot point, Simon's school comments, and that triggers the Barnaby brain fart in Tom. He realizes this has nothing to do with Tie House, and it's the school that connects all three victims. They track down Ian, who is in bed with Charles. Ian tells them he pays Charles for sex, and he is in deep denial about his own sexuality. When they tell him about Whiteley and Simon, Ian freaks out and gives the backstory. Ian, Richard, Simon, and David were all a secret society in primary school, calling themselves the Sign of the Four. A younger boy named Felix Bryce wanted to join, so they put him through initiation trials, the same ones we actually saw in Simon's dream. However, during a test of endurance where Felix had to stand on a chair with his neck in a noose for 5 minutes, he accidentally hangs himself. The boys ran away, and when Felix was discovered, it was assumed he committed suicide. His death ultimately led to his mother Jennifer dying from grief. When asked for more info on Felix and Jennifer, Agnes and Claire tell them they never knew who Felix's father was. So over at the church, Joyce and Cully meet with Stephen to discuss how the vow renewal ceremony will go. Unfortunately, Joyce's worst nightmare comes true when Barnaby and Troy arrive and tell them the ceremony is off and that Stephen is under arrest for the murders. We get the reveal. When Richard spoke to Stephen privately, he was confessing his sins and revealed the true story of Felix's death. What he didn't know is that Stephen had an affair with Jennifer 30 years before, and he was Felix's father. They never revealed the truth, and when Felix died, Stephen thought it was suicide just like everyone else. He was forced to watch the only two people he loved die, while he was stuck in a toxic, loveless marriage with Angela for another 30 years. When Richard told him the truth, Stephen felt the need for vengeance against the men he decided had ruined his life. He took the sword and killed Richard, but then realized he needed an alibi. So he staged the whole sword robbery and set Angela's alarm clock back 20 minutes, but right before Richard was killed. That way, when he woke her up, she remembered the time as 11:40, giving him an alibi. Then he burned Whiteley and shot Simon in broad daylight. Stephen is matter-of-fact and unapologetic for his actions, even though Barnaby points out that he was blaming them for an accident that happened when they were children. Before they have a chance to take him in, he runs to the top of the church and leaps to his death, making sure Angela watches from below. In the end, the Barnabys decide to just go to Venice on the Orient Express, because I'm sure no murder's ever going to happen on the Orient Express.
No way.
Strange kill. So this is an episode of particularly vicious murders, but I feel like the strange kill is the burning of David Whiteley. Not because it's strange, but because why didn't he try to break out through any of the multiple windows in his camper?
I know. Yeah.
Was he just too drunk?
I think it would have, and I know they had that scene of him asking why, in God's name, why, which is very dramatic, but I think it would have been better if they had just shown him, like, getting burned to death or succumbing to, which most burning victims do, at least initially succumb to smoke inhalation.
Yeah, I mean, it looked weird. Like, he's literally pounding on a window, and I'm like, smash the window open and climb out.
Yeah. Grab something heavy, smash the window.
Maybe use the bottle of booze that you were clutching in your sleep. I also have to point out, this was not a particularly great episode for white guys in their 40s.
They were dropping like flies.
Oh, yeah. So our killer was Stephen Wentworth. I have to say, what a performance and character reversal.
He plays him so much through the episode as this stock Becker character, slightly befuddled, well-meaning. You've seen this character so many times, but it's very much a Murder of Roger Ackroyd twist, if you know that Christie novel.
Yeah, I mean, every element of his performance, of his lines, has double meanings once you watch it again. When he is revealed as the killer, the subtle change of the expression on his face that turned sort of this, what seemed to be slightly befuddled, turns sinister.
Mm-hmm.
turns dark.
Yeah.
Great, great, powerful lines. They killed my son.
Mm-hmm.
In the whole eulogy, he said, like, Barnaby points out that he paid the price was a very weird thing to say in a eulogy.
Mm-hmm.
But when you actually look at the eulogy and what he says, it's both an admission
Mm-hmm.
and the plan of what he's going to do next.
Yeah.
Deception came easy to me. I killed them because I wanted to, and I'm glad I did.
Very unrepentant. Yeah. This is a man whose life was absolutely miserable.
Well, I have to say, it's like there's that point where we talk a little bit about dry rot in the
Mhm.
church. Now, dry rot is basically something that eats away at the core strength or integrity of buildings.
Mhm.
And I feel like the toxic marriage with Angela was his own spiritual dry rot.
Yeah.
His grief and Angela ate as in his interior moral strength until he becomes this person that we see in this episode who is willing to kill, violently kill
Mhm.
men for what they did as children.
Yeah. And they are very violent crimes. He basically decapitating very violently, which is a method of execution. Burning is a method of execution for heretics and traitors. Arrows brings back imagery of Saint Sebastian being executed by arrows. They're execution methods.
They're also cruel.
Yeah.
They're shockingly cruel and vindictive. Burning a man alive, cruel.
Mhm.
The violent beheading, to the point where, like, even Bullard says the head bounced.
Yeah.
The thoughtlessness of life of shooting someone with an arrow through a crowd. He didn't care if that arrow hit anyone else,
Yeah.
which I think is again sort of this spiritual dry rot within him that makes him such it. You know, there are some times when we've watched the show and we feel like, yeah, they kind of deserved a little revenge.
Mhm.
And I agree with Barnaby in this one. It's like they were kids.
Yeah.
They didn't deserve this. Now, they weren't great kids.
No, and the show once again shows that childhood is not all innocence and
Mhm.
light, and we've seen this in previous episodes, in um, especially in Left for Dead, and what we'll see when we do Death and Dreams. Childhood is often portrayed as sinister in Midsomer.
Mhm. Let's talk for a moment about that flashback sequence where we see them, right?
Mm-hmm.
So they're called the Sign of the Four,
Mm-hmm.
another symbol because that's the Sherlock Holmes mystery and is about a conspiracy where the members of the conspiracy are killed or die.
Yeah.
Much like what happens to the men of it in this episode.
Mm-hmm.
I thought they looked like young Tories playing games from the 1890s.
Yeah.
Also, just not this wasn't a flashback, but I did think in the modern day at the Fet, forcing those kids to do the maypole. None of those kids looked like they were enjoying it.
Yeah. And they weren't interweaving, which is what you do with a maypole. So it was kind of weird. It's
Yeah.
like, yeah, we're just kind of doing this for show. We're not really gonna do a proper maypole. And again, there's another religious symbol because the maypole you do for the Queen of the May, who is the Virgin Mary. So again, back to Jennifer, who seemingly gave virgin birth.
So the trial by gallows.
Mm-hmm.
First of all, why was the noose so tight?
Yeah. Why was it attached to anything?
Why was he wiggling?
Yeah.
Stand still. It's like, first of all, they really did put that in a bad spot. Like, but also you can see him just sort of like shaking the chair. And I'm like,
Mm-hmm.
just stand still. Your feet are firmly on the chair.
Yeah. And of course, the big question is, why did they tie his hands behind his back?
Well, not only that, if his hands were tied behind his back, why did everyone think it was suicide?
Yeah.
Because that would have been impossible.
Yeah. Yeah.
Why did the mom die?
Mm-hmm.
I like they just kept saying she slipped away. I'm assuming she maybe just stopped eating because of grief, but they don't really explain what that was.
Yeah. That's a very common thing, especially in old Victorian novels, dying of grief.
But also, I just feel like that it takes a long time to waste somebody away. And in modern times, they would just, you take them to a hospital.
Yeah.
So let's jump back to more on Steven, because there was a lot with this character. I thought, again,
Yeah.
it was a very strong performance.
Yeah.
But also there was a lot of great stuff around him. I think it's very interesting that like Tom literally says at one point, "Oh, Steven's not," like he has dismissed Steven entirely.
Mm-hmm.
Everybody underestimates Steven.
Yeah.
Angela at one point calls him small and insignificant.
Yeah.
What did you think of her?
That she was a very interesting character, and again, bravo for the actress for her performance. You know, people like that. You know, people who've had ambitions that are thwarted, and they become bitter, and they lash out at people who they ostensibly at one point loved. You know, she had, you know, and thought that she was going to be the bishop's wife or the archbishop's wife or something higher up than the parish priest's wife, and it ate her, and she took it out on Stephen. It's a very truthful character, but it's brutal.
But also as brutal is when Steven finally lashes back
Mm-hmm.
in such a beautiful played scene
Mm-hmm.
of just like he's wielding the knife. He's like, "You were the problem,"
Yeah.
which is both the truth and also blaming her for his own choices.
Yeah.
And that idea of acting is reacting, right? Her
Mm-hmm.
reaction to that, the looks on her face, the
Mm-hmm.
silence was incredible. Of just like she's never been talked to by him, like he's never talked to her like that.
Mm-hmm.
He's never he knows exactly how to lacerate her to her core.
Mm-hmm.
It's a beautifully done scene.
That was basically Who's Afraid of Virginia Woolf in a few scenes between the two of them.
Oh God, yeah. The staged robbery when he's running down the stairs to maybe investigate, like he's making a lot of noise.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, it looks like he's trying to be quiet, but later on you realize he's not really trying to be quiet. He's making as much noise so that she knows that he's down there, you know, investigating, you know.
I had to rewind to see what was missing, which I think might have been like an editing error. I think they might have wanted. I don't recall any kind of close-ups of the sword.
There weren't, but I did go back and watch the scene of the meeting, and they do show it. They don't hit you over the head with it, but there is, you know, you do see it. It's a very, very subtle Chekhov sword.
It's very subtle, but the point is like when you see something missing and you're like, well, what was missing?
Mm-hmm.
Like I shouldn't have been like, oh, that sword that we saw is
Mm-hmm.
gone.
Yeah.
It was a little too subtle. It needed like a 2-second insert of just the shot of the sword.
Mm-hmm.
The sword, by the way, which his father's sword from Calcutta,
Mm.
which is, I think, a subtle nod to colonialism.
Yeah.
One thing I didn't quite understand about the whole alibi stage robbery thing. We see him pretend to be asleep.
Mm-hmm.
Why? She's dead asleep. He's like, just in case she's faking, I'm going to pretend I'm asleep.
Yeah.
Even though if she was faking, she already knows that this is all.
That was for the viewer.
I just thought it was like a real, like when you go back and you're like when you realize he's the killer and you think about that and you're like, that was just meant for confusing the audience.
Mm-hmm.
Which I will say is like Midsomer doesn't do a lot of that.
Mm-hmm.
They don't do a lot of this weird fake out stuff. You know, they could have just started that scene seconds later where he's like, Angela, I heard, like with him just in bed with his eyes open, I heard a noise.
Yeah. Yeah.
Finally, like when he is revealed and he chooses to kill himself, the race to the top of the church
Mm-hmm.
where he violently kicks Troy, again showing this weird violent streak in him.
Yeah.
But he makes sure Angela watches.
Yeah.
I mean, the bitter and vindictive nature like he is of this person he has become.
Mm-hmm.
I think that was like the one time where I really felt sorry for Angela.
Yeah. Yeah.
That is a real nasty piece of work.
Yeah.
He also has that line of when Troy's like basically trying to talk him down.
Mm-hmm.
And he's like, of course I'm going to do it. I should have done it years ago.
Yeah.
The weird matter-of-fact nature of his line readings when he is revealed to be the killer, I thought is wonderful.
Yeah.
It really makes him, I think, one of the most interesting Midsomer villains of all time.
He's not the all of a sudden I'm crazy, but I've been pretending to be sane. This is a man who had a lifetime of basically pretending to be, happy in his village vicar life, who lost something 30 years ago that he could not show anybody.
Yeah.
The mask has always been there, but he was not crazy. This was not crazy. He was angry. He was vengeful. He was Nemesis, and we'll talk about Nemesis in a minute.
Tell me about Nemesis.
Well, Nemesis is the Greek goddess of revenge and retribution. But ideally, she was meant to restore balance. So when you read a lot of the Greek tragedies, the revenge is meant to restore balance. It doesn't always do that, obviously. Yeah. It's in contrast to Justice, who's personified by the goddess Themis. This is not Themis. This is not Justice. This is Nemesis. This is revenge.
Justice is, well, I think that's because justice is a concept of it's a broader concept. There's revenge is personal.
Yeah.
Countries and national structures can provide justice. They shouldn't provide revenge or retribution.
No. And that's why he has his call out to Angela, so that he makes sure that she sees him when he's dying. That's another element of revenge. I just wonder what he had in store for Ian.
Probably would have killed Ian and Charles.
Yeah.
I thought visually the scene of where he jumps off was well done. The camera, they've done this a few times on this show where people jump off buildings and the camera goes down. They drop the camera till it goes to the ground. I thought it looked really cool. I thought the thud and the crunch.
Yeah. Well, Breyer said in an interview that this was his first stunt and he was 64 years old. So he enjoyed that. But again, as always, excellent work by the camera crew.
Yep. We mentioned Ian. I thought he was a really interesting character. Mm-hmm. Especially when you find out that basically the whole reason he's going broke is because he keeps paying Charles for sex because he can't actually admit that he's gay.
Yeah. Yeah.
In fact, he seems to deeply hate himself and denies that he's gay and hates himself for what he's doing, which I thought was really an interesting character.
I think, these early seasons where they have, we saw it in Written in Blood, where we have these gay characters, there is a lot more subtlety and more thoughtfulness to these characters than is normal in a 90s drama.
Yeah, I would agree that they don't treat them as jokes.
Yeah.
Or as the criminals. You know, there has been some shows I've watched where the trope of the lesbian killer was really apparent.
Yeah.
But I've found that in this they've they always tend to treat homosexuality as with a thoughtful take on it, even to the point of it is because they're so thoughtful on it, the fact that they make Troy homophobic is a real problem.
Yeah.
And it is a major problem with that character because it's never resolved.
Yeah.
It gets just forgotten about.
I mean, we see Tom call him on it, and Tom is always like, it doesn't matter, I don't care about that, Kudos to Nettles for maybe making that a part of Barnaby's character.
Yeah. I thought it was ironic when Ian sort of denies being out at night. What do you mean being out? Outside. But also when he gets so sinister.
Yeah.
It's interesting. It's again, you're looking at the dry rot. A man who has to deny himself. Look how he treats his wife, how he treats everyone else. He is a man who is rotting to the core because he cannot be honest with himself about who he is.
Yeah. The dry rot, not only, it's a very symbolic thing, not only for the church and for Stephen and Ian, but Becker's Drift in and of itself, and Midsomer in and of itself.
Yeah.
Because this is a county with an absurdly high murder rate. These people
they just can't admit how much they love to murder.
It's rotting from the inside, literally.
Oh, by the way, so when Richard says Erickson's is bigger,
Yeah.
My first thought was, hey, sorry, Ian, size matters. Let's talk a little bit about Simon and Cully. He starts at the beginning. We see this dream sequence.
Mm-hmm.
Don't really know who this guy is.
Yeah.
It takes a little while before we learn that he is a famous theater director who's
Mhm.
coming to Badger's Drift or Coston.
They were doing that in Corston.
Okay, so then when Steven rides off his bike
Mm-hmm.
to go get him, how far away is Badger's Drift and Coston that he can ride that far and then be back?
A lot of the fan maps show Badger's Drift being fairly far from Corston, but I think it's much closer because they talk about the people from Corston coming to buy these places for the weekend and stuff. And it's like, I mean, Corston's not that big, so you know, you're really getting away to the country. But it can't be that far. I mean, they're going there fairly easily.
He's not even sweaty.
Yeah.
He should, like, if it's really a far away, he should be like, oh my God. Hey,
Yeah.
can I get a ride back?
Yeah.
So anyways, he's there. He just starts, he has a discussion about the Duchess of Malfi on screen.
Mm-hmm.
So like they really do lay out that this is all about retribution and more murder. Again, laying on the symbolism of this episode.
Mm-hmm.
Also, they lay out pretty early that when he is staring at Cully's headshot, that he has the hots for Cully.
Yeah.
And then he asked her out, and she said yes, because it's also been established that Cully has a thing for older men.
Yeah. At least for a while.
Well, we never really know how much older, whatever his name was, Dickhead?
Yeah, Nico and Simon were... Yeah. Another Simon. See, she marries a Simon.
What was his nickname? His friends call me, like... It was like, it called him a weird name, and I was like, don't tell a girl you like that, ever.
Yeah.
The weird meeting between Simon and Cully, Cully's dad.
Yeah. Yeah. Always weird.
Why was Cully on stage at the Fete?
I don't know. I mean, I can see why, why Angela was up there, even though she didn't want to be. I will say, as someone who didn't want to be part of it, she did do her due diligence and she appeared there and even got sticky fingers from a kid on her dress.
Yep. So let's talk about sort of the timeline weirdness at the end of this episode.
Yeah, this is something that I noticed and it had kind of bothered me. And I really, when I was watching it again for the last time, really went back and studied this. But okay, so the Fete takes place in the afternoon and Simon is killed soon after it starts, so probably around 3:00. And then they have all their police work to do. Joyce tells Tom earlier before the murder that the meeting with the vicar is the following day at 11 and that he better not be late. So after Simon's death, Tom and Cully discuss it at the Fete, and that's when she reveals the stuff about the school. And that's when Tom tells Troy that the school, not Tie House, connects the victims. They seem to run off immediately. But the next scene shows them rushing to Ian's office, but they're wearing different clothes.
Mm-hmm.
And then the only clue that it's the next day, other than the clothing, is that Joyce and Cully are shown at the church. And she's saying, Tom is already late. So why did they wait until the next day to rush to find Ian when they knew he was in danger?
Well, also, here's a question then. Because we see Ian and Charles disappear at the Fete to go off and have sex.
Yeah.
Are we to then assume that they have been in this house all the way overnight having sex? Because they are the ones who inform Ian of Simon and David's murder, which he would have found out about if he had gone home, because again, everyone talks in this village.
Yeah. It's weird.
Well, wouldn't have Brenda or anything like that, wouldn't have like, my husband is missing, there's a lot of murders going on.
Yeah.
Like it I feel like the timeline, I feel like they must have meant to have like Ian be the day of the Fete and then maybe Agnes and Claire the following day.
Yeah.
But wardrobe-wise, they might have screwed that up.
Yeah.
Because you're right, structurally, it makes no sense.
Yeah. And a really terrific episode that stuck out to me as an error in continuity. Yeah.
It's a big one.
Yeah.
Okay, so let's go into corner. Bullard is mostly there just to be shocked.
It's like he forgot all about the Rainbirds and how brutal their deaths were.
Well, they didn't have their heads chopped off.
Nearly, though.
He says that he's never seen anything more ferocious, and I wonder how his opinion changes over the years. I wonder if he's got like a tally somewhere in the office of just like, woof, like in the scale. I got my own top 10 of like most vicious Midsomer murders.
Yeah.
And then he's even at like Whiteley's death. He's like, what is going on? I'm like, just back off, man. You want to be a detective, go to detective school like Tom did.
Yeah. It's Badger's Drift, Jake.
Which also kind of leads into the detective works because this takes Barnaby a while.
Mm-hmm.
He points out that they are barking up the wrong tree, which is almost literally, considering how much trees play into everything in this episode.
Yeah.
I thought it was interesting. He comments at Whiteley's murder. He says, we could have stopped Whiteley's murder.
Mm-hmm.
How?
Yeah, especially since they were all thinking this is all Tie House related.
Like, if you think it was Tie House related, and it was like, well, if you could have, like, if you thought that he was in real danger, right,
Mm-hmm.
you would have had police on him. And it was like it's Whiteley's own damn fault for talking about it. And it has nothing to do with Tie House. But even in the moment, he didn't know that.
Yeah.
But still, it's a weird thing to say.
Yeah.
But he is visibly upset about the state of Richard's body.
Yeah.
I don't recall him ever like kind of reacting as strong as he did in the face. Like he is like, ah.
Yeah.
I do like they keep making Troy deal with all the bodies.
Yeah. Yeah, you go do that, Troy.
Like, what do you want me to do? Go and stare at that burnt corpse.
Yeah.
I love when he reiterates to Troy that nobody will ever tell you the truth in this job.
Yeah. Including the guy he thought was telling him the truth.
Yep. Which is, again, is like part of the problem is he kind of swallows he forgets his own truth. He forgets his own sort of philosophy there.
And it happens a couple of times in his career. He sets his skepticism aside because he likes a suspect. We saw that with the X-Men Cometh. We'll see it again in the Jelly episode.
Yep. Did you think that finding that photo was a little too lucky?
Yeah. It was a very convenient clue.
Yeah, it was just like it happened to just be singed on the edges, and like then it went out.
Yeah, and everything else was burnt down to the
cinders.
Yeah.
That's back in those old days when they made photos as flame retardant as possible.
Yeah.
I also thought it was a little odd that he arrests Stephen and does the whole thing in front of Cully and Joyce.
Yeah.
Hey, this is police business. Maybe you guys should, not be here.
Yeah.
When we're dealing with a violent madman, a violent murderer.
Yeah. Yes. He could have just as easily had said, Joyce, Cully, would you please step out?
Yeah.
Yeah.
You need to leave now.
Yeah.
Especially as you see how violent he is he, as violent he is when he escapes. It's just, Cully and Joyce were in real danger there.
Yeah.
We see another classic costume PD Brecky.
Mm-hmm. Always yummy.
His only good meal of the day.
Yeah. He seems to really relish those breakfasts.
Yep. The question of asking Troy what his favorite hymn in church was,
Mm-hmm.
or no, what's your favorite church hymn?
Mm-hmm.
Onward, Marmite soldiers.
Yeah. I'd be kind of hard pressed to pick my favorite hymn, unless we add Christmas carols to the list.
At the fete, we see Troy throwing at the coconut game.
I'm with Troy. I think those things are nailed down.
Probably. But I also thought this sets up his pitching ability.
Yeah.
That we then see in Dead Man's 11.
Yeah.
They really were doing a lot of layer. I feel like the first 3 or 4 episodes of this series,
Mm-hmm.
they really kind of they were like, I think they wrote them together in a way.
Yeah.
Like as opposed to an episodic thing, which they normally do.
Yeah. There was a lot more of a thoughtful arc to the series.
Yeah. They're telling a kind of complete narrative,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
which they've never really done again, other than things like Sarah pregnant,
Mm-hmm.
Cully getting married, but they're not they kind of handled in episode.
Yeah.
Right. At the home life.
Yep.
It's their 25th anniversary.
Yep. Yep. Happy anniversary, Tom and Joyce.
Joyce wants to retake the vows. She wants to be the center of attention, which I kind of loved.
Yeah, because she never gets to be. I mean,
Yeah.
seriously, she never gets to be. Even if she finds a body, she's not the center of attention.
Well, she never gets. It's not even about center of attention with other people. I think it's the center of attention for Tom.
Yeah,
Tom always puts her second.
yeah.
As she points out, the first wedding was spoiled by the Pimlico poisoner, which makes me think, why haven't they done a prequel series of young Tom Barnaby?
That would be good.
I mean, BBC ITV. I'm calling this now. You can do a Midsomer spinoff, young Tom Barnaby, because like we don't see him until the 90s.
Yeah.
Like, this episode is 90. What? This was episode 99.
Yeah.
Which means they've been married for 25 years. Which means they've been married since the 70s.
Yeah.
He has been solving murders since the 70s. You could do like a historical
Endeavor. They did it with Endeavor. Yeah.
Yep. I'm telling you right now, this is money in the bank.
Yeah.
And if they do one, I'm putting this out here right now. I want a piece of it because I just came up with it.
And with it set in the 70s, they can have a sly reference to life on Mars.
Yeah, you can do all kinds of fun things.
Yeah.
Joyce wants her favorite hymns.
Mm-hmm.
Onward, Christian soldiers, all things bright and beautiful are two of them. Are these wedding hymns? Onward, Christian soldiers?
Yeah. Those were not part of, the Catholic Church in the U.S. Hymnal. So I was not. I mean, I'd heard of them because of
Onward, Christian soldiers was is like basically the theme of colonialism.
It certainly is. Yes.
Not great wedding music.
Yeah.
Unless Tom's going to sing them. What a voice.
Yeah. Yeah. I think it comes a lot from having done theater. You were trained to do all sorts of things for theater.
Yeah. What, Tom singing?
Yeah.
Or Nettles is singing? I just think, but the character of Tom didn't do theater, so I just think it's meant to be just a fun singing voice.
Yeah.
Joyce at one point mentions there were 40 people coming. They had 40. So who made those calls to cancel?
Yeah.
Night of.
Yeah. And those poor people who came in from New York.
We came to the murder capital of the UK for your thing. We get dead. You're paying for the funeral.
Yeah.
So Joyce serves Tom burnt toast because she's mad.
Mm-hmm.
Considering the state of her cooking, is she just always mad?
Yeah.
What did you think of the Barnaby's rhythm in this episode? To me, it seemed, I don't know, I felt a little off. I'm not sure why.
I don't know. I mean, let's face it, there was a lot of home life in this episode. It was a major part of it. And it may have been just that there was just so much of it. Normally we just see her providing some essential clue from a book she's read for him or something.
It just seemed that they were on edge. Or like Joyce seemed to be, like I said, like we pointed out that she was mad earlier, right? Mm-hmm. Blaming Tom for the murders that he has no control over. Yeah. But it seemed like there's a slightly more aggressive or angry to her about this 20th anniversary, wanting it this bad. Mm-hmm. And sort of, I don't know, for me, it felt like at times like they generally have a pretty easy interplay that wasn't there this time.
Yeah. And I think mainly it is for the stress. And, she was throwing a party, which is stressful.
Yeah.
Planning, and then they have to throw all those plans out the window. She knows that she's never going to have Tom's full attention. She never has.
Nope. Never will.
And never will. And, she's probably sitting there thinking, okay, I'm planning this whole freaking party, and he's going to leave in the middle of it.
Mm-hmm.
So, yeah, I'm with Joyce on this. I think I'd be a little tense.
It's very fair. Very fair. In the end, they do decide to go to Venice on the Orient Express.
Yeah.
A callback to Agatha Christie's Murder on the Orient Express. I can't believe Joyce would willingly do that. Why would she agree to that? It's like, you're just going to leave me halfway through this train ride.
Yeah. And again, bringing up the Orient, because as I said earlier, the Orient Express is the ultimate revenge mystery. And it's mentioned early on, and all this misdirection about Ty House was really brilliant when it was all about revenge.
I also want to point out that at the end, Cully holds up a little box
Yeah.
that I guess was full of rose petals on their way, but I thought it was a box of condoms.
Eric, nobody wants to think of their parents having sex.
Maybe she was, I don't know, she has the house to herself. Maybe she's holding them going, guess what I'm going to do while you're...
Yeah, her last boyfriend just had an arrow in the back.
Oof. So, final thoughts.
I think this is a really top-notch episode. I think the writing, I mean, obviously there's some, and we pointed out that one continuity thing and a few other things, but the depth of characters in this and the acting is, again, is just really, really excellent. And the misdirection with the whole, but yet they drop all the clues that this is all about revenge. And so that when it comes up, it's like, of course it is.
Well, we talk a lot about episodes that are overstuffed and undercooked, right?
Mm-hmm.
This is an episode that is overstuffed, but cooked to perfection.
Yeah.
The one continuity error is almost like if they were wearing the right clothing, it would be fine.
Yeah.
Everything else in this episode is well balanced. It is a solid whodunit.
Mm-hmm.
It's fair play. All the clues are there.
Yeah.
There's no last minute shift. The acting is superb. Steven's character change at the end, so good, leaving a very memorable villain.
Mm-hmm.
It's really, even the home life stuff is balanced in a way that either, as opposed to sometimes they just have the comic relief, it's there for comic relief.
Mm-hmm.
There's an important part of this story.
Yeah. Both Cully and Joyce.
Yeah. So I think would be in my right now of all the episodes, just of the ones that we've rewatched.
Mm-hmm.
Definitely in my top 5, might even be in my top 3.
I agree. And the only reason I, picked up the continuity era is just because it's like I've watched it several times.
Yeah. It holds up on rewatch.
It does hold up on rewatch, yeah. And again, kudos to Anthony Horowitz. Kudos to Jeremy Silverstone,
who are the original Killings of Badger Drift crew.
Yep. Kudos again, and I gotta find out who these cameramen that they use, or camera people they use, because again, brilliantly filmed.
So, absolutely, Death Shadow is in the Midsomer Hall of Fame.
Yeah. And again, even with the title, the religious imagery there, because it harkens back to the Psalm, though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, which they all were. And apparently everybody in Midsomer does.
I mean, just for the sheer amount of symbolism that they threw into this episode, which is not something you can really say about Midsomer.
Yeah.
Right? That they're not overly symbolic things. They threw a lot in this.
Yeah.
But again, it was full of stuff. I never felt lost. I never felt like they didn't give something enough time.
Mm-hmm.
I never felt like they were. Now, granted, this is second series where the episodes were like an hour and 40 minutes as opposed to the under an hour and a half that we get now.
Yeah.
10 minutes doesn't seem like a lot of time, but in the world of film, TV, 10 minutes is a lot.
Yeah. And all that symbolism, that's got religious symbolism from Christian religious symbol. It's got Greek mythology symbolism. It's got callbacks to Agatha Christie galore in this.
Yes.
So it's just so wonderfully done. And like you said, it's so overstuffed, but it is like the best buffet ever.
I think that's the best line to end this on. So that's everything we wanted to talk about. If you have anything you want to discuss about Death's Shadow or Midsomer Murders in general, please feel free to email us at welcometomidsomer@gmail.com. If you want us to use the email in the show, please say so in your email. We are also Welcome to Midsomer on Facebook and Instagram and Threads. We are also Welcome to Midsomer on YouTube, where we've been uploading our old episodes. Please follow us in all these places. We've been getting such a really, if you're listening to us on YouTube, thank you for all the wonderful comments that you've been putting on these episodes. Really means the world to us. If you like what you hear, please consider subscribing to us or rating or reviewing us on iTunes or Spotify. It really helps people find us. Also, please turn on the automatic downloads because that also really helps. Tell all your friends about us. We're going to be back in a few weeks. We hope you will join us again. And as we take the road out of Midsomer, we want to thank you for listening and remind you that in Midsomer, going to confession can be murder.
Yeah, you might just want to keep that to yourself.
Welcome to Midsomer is produced by Eric Buscher and Eileen Becker. All clips in this podcast are used in compliance with the U.S. Copyrights Act Fair Use Exception for criticism and commentary. Our logo and podcast art was designed by Smeedrai. Our theme music is by the infamous Space. A lot of people might recognize him as Socrates or Socrates in Bill and Ted's Excellent Adventure.
Party up? Wait, sorry.
That is not even the right.
Okay, cut that out.
Nope.